I still don't quite understand how the pirate ships are involved in the Revolutionary War, but I'm excited to learn. I've been studying all about the pirate ships.
Cydni, why did you study pirate ships?
What?
Not talking about pirate ships.
That's what you said, pirate ships.
I did not say pirate ships.
What did you say?
I said prison ships.
Pirates.
Pirate ships. I said prison ships.
Okay, so today's episode is, let's say, not on pirate ships.
Let's say that, yeah.
Aye, aye, Captain.
I'm making my way through the drip, drip, drop.
Welcome to the Cydni and Sher podcast. We're so glad you're here. But can I keep on the eye patch?
Yes. Despite what Cydni thinks the topic is about today, we're going to discuss the actual cost of freedom.
Or the loot of freedom.
Either one. But when we think about the American Revolution, I think oftentimes we just skip to the ending and we just say, oh, look, we won. And that it was just this fun little war and we just were able to win and defeat the most powerful nation, country in the world at the time. And that was it. But that's really not how it went down. There was a lot of sacrifice that went into us being able to win the war and gain our freedom. And the reason that the people that fought in the American Revolution were able to stay absolute in this is because they truly believe that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they were willing to die for this belief so that we could enjoy it and take it for granted like we do today. While I was thinking about this, I looked up a few fun facts. And as you know, Cydni and I are really good with numbers, so good luck with this, Cydni. So the percentage of population that the American Revolution killed was about 1%. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when we compare this with other wars that the United States has been involved with, this is how it goes down. So the deadliest war that Americans have ever fought in is the Civil War, and that killed about 2 to 2.5% of our population. World War I killed about 0.1% of our population. World War II killed about 0.3%. And the Korean War killed about 0.02%. And the Vietnam War killed 0.03%. The War on Terror was about 0.002%. So this makes the American Revolution, based on our population size, the second deadliest war in American history. And so today what we're going to do is talk about some of the sacrifices that these incredible patriots made on our behalf. And we're going to talk, listen carefully, Cydni, we're going to talk about prison ships.
That reminds me that the one number you have not mentioned is how many pirates were killed. I asked AI how many pirates during this time died, and it said technically all of them. And then I had the best laugh.
That's pretty funny.
It was really good. I was like, I guess all of them from the 1700s are dead. And I just don't feel like we appreciate that fact as much as we should. Have you recently considered that all of the pirates during the 1700s have since passed?
Okay, so anyway, Cydni, we are going to talk about prison ships.
I do want you to know. If you want me to pay attention, you could say avast, because that means pay attention. If you want to talk like a pirate, the pro tip is to drop your G's, roll your R's, and add me instead of my. Avast me hearties. Now you be ready to talk like a pirate.
You kind of
I had an accent.
Yeah, you kind of had an English accent or something going on there.
Recently, I gave a talk at church and a man came up after. He's like, I loved your talk. Where's your accent from? And I thought, I don't know, like white trash, Arizona. I don't know. So I just have a natural accent.
I think we both do. I got it from my parents. I'm very proud of it. All right. So anyway, back to what we're talking about today. We are going to talk about prison ships. We're going to talk about the cost of the war.
The loot of the war.
No, the cost of the war on civilians and their unfaltering faith. They were so faithful to God. The reason we wanted to talk about prison ships today is because there were about 25,000 people that died in the American Revolution, and 10 to 12,000 of those people died on the prison ships. The prison ships were located in Charleston, South Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, Norfolk, Virginia, off the coast of Florida, Canada, but the majority of the ships, and by far the most deadly prison ships, were in the New York harbor. The worst ship was HMS Jersey, and it was just nicknamed Hell.
And that is an appropriate name for what took place there.
It truly is. This HMS Jersey was built to hold about 400 prisoners, but it often held over 1,000. And I wanted to just go over some eyewitness accounts from the HMS Jersey. The first one is Christopher Vell. He was a privateer, which actually gets me to your point, Cydni. Did you know that our first Navy was kind of nothing more than just pirates because we couldn't afford a Navy in the American Revolution? And so we basically just said, anyone who has a boat, go ahead and try to steal anything you can off British boats, and you get to keep whatever you steal. So basically, we were pirates to start with.
I mean, that makes sense because, as we know, pirates were actually very surprisingly democratic. They voted together on who would be captains and quartermasters, and they made major decisions by vote. They had rules and they had compensations for injuries. Like if you lost an eye, you got more shares of the loot. So I feel like a lot of the inspiration for America came from these men. And the women who were hard as nails. They were tough.
I don't know if I'm going to let you talk in this episode anymore. We'll find out.
You might want to be careful. I've learned a lot about pirates. I do have someone in my family line who was killed by a pirate.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
Thanks. It's not funny. No. He doesn't think it's funny.
No, I'm sure. Okay, back to Christopher Vell, who was a privateer, and he was captured. According to his account, this is what he said, that when a man died, he was carried up to the top front of the ship and left there until about 8 o'clock the next morning. When the bodies were lowered over the ship's side by rope, in his words, this is the direct quote, in the same manner as though they were beasts. And then he said that the dead were then carried onto the shore in heaps, unloaded onto the wharf, and taken by hand barrow to a shallow pit, dug only about a foot or two deep, where they were buried altogether. And usually about 8 people a day died. So this went on every single day. That is just so terrible. Another eyewitness, his name was Thomas Andros. He was also a privateer, so a pirate, just for you, Cydni.
Thank you.
I don't know why I opened that door, so I'm going to hurry and move on. So Andros described the disease conditions aboard the Jersey by writing this, that every deadly illness was pressed into the service of the king of terrors, and dysentery, smallpox, and yellow fever were, in that king's prime ministers. So basically, these gross, horrible diseases were ruling the ship. He escaped, though, and made his way back home, but he was so ill that he was bedridden for months from being on that ship. But he went on to become a minister for over 46 years. His wife died and he remarried, and between his 2 wives, he had 17 children, and he died at the age of 86.
I actually was really touched that he became a minister for so long, because something like that could really break your spirits.
That is exactly what I thought. And that's what I think is so amazing. Why did they go through all of this? They did this because they truly believed that having agency, liberty, was God's will, and they wanted to be obedient to God. And that is what's so amazing about the American Revolution is we shouldn't have won this war. But because of the faith and then the miracles that then happened, they were able to do this for us.
Yes, that reminds me of what Michael Knowles says on a little segment he does on the Revolutionary War. He says to remember this, that the men did not sign up for good food, warm clothes, or pity parties. They enlisted for a purpose, to defend their country, and the defense of one's country requires sacrifice. They did not stand to gain much of anything at all, at least materially, for their troubles. What motivated them was more valuable: honor, virtue, ideals.
That was beautiful. And I loved those last words, the honor, virtue, and ideals. That truly is why they were willing to go through all of this suffering, is because they truly believed that. Okay, another eyewitness to the HMS Jersey was Silas Talbot. He was a soldier and another privateer, another pirate, just for you, Cydni.
It's not just for me. This is for history. This is for those pirates, the men and women pirates out there who are all dead from the 1700s.
Well, Silas was wounded 13 times, and he carried 5 musket balls in his body for the rest of his life. Can you believe that?
It's impressive.
Yeah, he's a tough dude. He was caught commanding the privateer ship that he named General Washington, which I really like. But when Talbot was aboard the HMS Jersey, there was roughly 1,100 prisoners on it. He said there was absolutely no place to lie down. There were many men on the boat that did not have enough clothes. He also noted that the colder and drier weather did reduce deaths to only about 10 a day. Unbelievable. He also said the ship's daily toll was as destructive as a field of battle. He was eventually moved to an English prison, and he tried to escape from this English prison multiple times, but he was eventually released in 1781 because of Benjamin Franklin and John Jay negotiating with the British. He later commanded the USS Constitution, or Old Ironsides, which is currently in the Boston Harbor. You can go and you can tour it, and it's still considered part of the Navy, and it's still used at least once a year. They take it out onto the ocean. That's one of my very favorite things to do on the Freedom Trail in Boston, is to go on the ship. It's really cool.
I can't believe he ever got back on a ship.
I would say hard pass. No, thank you.
I don't even want to get on a ship now. Nothing against pirates.
You don't want him to come and loot your home.
No. I did learn one real thing. I actually learned several, but this one's good. I think you will appreciate it.
Yeah, but why share what you actually learned? Just keep talking about
I know the pirates. Okay, I learned that the prisoners on the Jersey, they actually established on their own code of laws. And they did this to make it as pleasant as possible for everyone. And I love that this was not done by those who captured them to keep things in order. It was done because of the men and the children. There was young men who were on this ship as well. They did it to make things run, to help each other. One thing that they did was they made sure that with the meager allotted food they did have, it was evenly shared. That's incredibly impressive.
It really is.
They also had a rule or a code for mutual aid. Whoever was close to you, whoever was in your reach, you took care of. If they were sick, or if they were sad, whatever it was, if they were in your reach, you had a duty to help and to serve. They also did their best with hygiene, and they had codes in place to help with the hygiene as much as possible, or sleeping areas where they would take turns. Like, this is where you sleep. It's a little bit more space, and then rotation. And I felt like this just proves the type of men and young men who were the ones fighting for the freedom, because in their core, they believed in these kind of codes, and they're all very honorable codes.
Yeah, it shows that they truly did believe in self-control and being virtuous. They really did practice what they preached.
They really did. They believed in maintaining order and fairness and to help each other survive as best as possible.
I love that, Cydni. Thank you for not talking about pirates for a hot second.
Pirates. Just kidding. I had nothing.
Okay. Now, this story, I think, is just amazing. This is Elizabeth Burgin, and she lived in New York City. And most historians think she was a war widow, and she had 3 young children. Now, only women were permitted to visit the prison ships.
Because they were weak-minded and they were not capable of accomplishing anything.
You need to let that go, Cydni.
Let it sink to the bottom of the ocean.
Yes, please let it sink. Okay, so she began rowing out to the ships to bring the prisoners food and clothing and medicine and blankets to American prisoners.
But could we just acknowledge how terrifying that alone would be?
It would be very terrifying. And what I was wondering is if her husband died on the prison ship, or if she had some sort of a connection. I have no idea. But yes, absolutely brave to do this. So in 1779, she was asked by George Higday, who was part of Washington's Culper spy ring, which we talked about last week. Anyway, George Higday recruited her to help smuggle prisoners off the ship, and she agreed to it. And she helped multiple officers escape off the prison ship. Elizabeth Burgin is credited with helping over 200 American prisoners escape off these ships. The British weren't very good at counting. They didn't keep very good track. So sometimes they wouldn't notice that prisoners were missing for a couple of weeks.
I read this, but I have a question. How would they ever know someone was missing? with the condition and how many were squeezed into one area, there's no way. Or how did the other prisoners not try to jump and get on and join them? I don't understand how this was done.
I don't either. I did read that she was pulling off the leadership off the ship because they were probably the most likely to get hung.
Oh, good point. I can't imagine because like 200, so many. But I just had this feeling that she probably thought it was never enough.
Oh, I'm sure. So the British, though, they did eventually intercept one of Washington's letters that led them to Higday, and Higday's wife, in order to spare her husband, totally snitched out Elizabeth Burgin. So the British put a 200-pound bounty on her head, which I read was equivalent to roughly 20 years of pay for a British soldier at the time. She was a wanted woman. Elizabeth had to go into hiding for over 2 weeks. She was unable to even see her own children because the British kept an armed guard in front of her house, and she couldn't get into her house or to her children even. This is a quote I found about her. It said, she eventually escaped with help from friends to Long Island, hid there for 5 more weeks, and finally fled by whaleboat with a man named William Scudder, being chased by British boats partway across Long Island Sound. Before finally reaching Philadelphia, she lost her home and nearly all her possessions, which were confiscated and sold. That's an amazing sacrifice. Washington personally wrote to the Continental Congress on her behalf, and Congress granted her a pension in 1781. That's the year the war ended. She collected this pension until 1787, and then we don't know what happened to her for sure. I mean, kind of looks like she passed away, but we don't know for sure. She wrote a letter to Washington, though, and this is what she said to him. Helping our poor prisoners brought me to want, which I don't repent. So she was very solid in that she did not regret any of this. She didn't regret rescuing our soldiers and sailors that were on the prison ships, and she did not regret losing everything she had. I mean, clearly she would have done it again.
I just wonder about that woman who turned her in. I wonder if she had regrets.
I know,
like I bet
snitch.
1 year after the war, she was like, I should have just let him go. You know?
I hope that they gave her some money or something because she lost everything. But in it all, she was unapologetic and it was worth it to her. These are tough men and women that fought for our freedom.
Hey, you know what, Cher? Did you know that pirates, they wore earrings because not just, no,
Why?
this Cher, this doesn't fit anywhere. I need to say it. I did not know this, but they wore their earrings not just for fashionable purposes, but in case they were killed, they wanted to have proper burials. So they were hoping the gold in their teeth and in their earrings would pay for their burial.
That's good information.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thank you, Cydni. So the next thing we want to talk about is the British. They did take over several cities and areas in the United States. They took over Boston for a little while. They had New York for the entire war. They took over Newport, Rhode Island for a bit, Philadelphia, Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina. And the people that lived in these cities and surrounding areas did not have it very easy. So I wanted to tell you a few stories about these people that were basically captured by the British during the war. So the first person I want to talk about is a woman whose name is Elizabeth Drinker.
Sounds like a pirate name to me.
Of course it does. So she was a Quaker from Philadelphia, and Quakers did not believe in fighting in a war, so they tried to remain neutral. Because of this, though, neither side, the Americans and the British, they didn't trust them. And so her husband was one of about 20 men that were moved from Philadelphia to Virginia because the Americans thought he was a spy. She was by herself with her 4 children, her little sister, and servants who were helping her run a trading business. She and her husband ran an export-import business. During this time, the king and parliament passed something called the Quartering Act, where British soldiers could just move into your home and take all your stuff as needed. The British did this to Elizabeth. Major John Crammed and his servants moved in, and this is what she said about it. I fear we shall have our family disagreeably encumbered. You think? He's just moving on in.
But that's just a really nice way of saying it. If ever I'm in this situation, I will too say it this way. Maybe.
I don't think I will. I'm just going to be honest.
You're going to pull a pistol out of your bosom like your ancestors is what you're going to do.
Amen. All right. But fortunately for her, he turned out to be a decent human being. She described him as behaving with much politeness and called him a thoughtful, sober young man.
So if you're going to break in and live at someone else's house, at least be polite about it.
Exactly. So her family actually kept writing him, kept correspondence with him after the British left Philadelphia, but unfortunately he died later on in the war.
I think that just proves how many good people are on all the sides, that they're just real people. Mm-hmm. And one side, they're fighting for something they really believe in, and others are forced to fight, right?
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. I agree with that. However, Elizabeth did write down about her neighbor named Mary Eddy that she had a British soldier who barred her from her own front door so she couldn't even get in the house, and then moved his mistress into the house. Can you believe that?
No, what a horrible house guest.
She also wrote about how the British often broke down doors to get in the house, threatened to kill the citizens that lived in the house, and they just took whatever they wanted. She said that even with the British officer living at her own home, that soldiers came in and took her blankets, and one of her servants ran off with the British soldier. So that's never good.
I want to know more about that love story. But this just proves there's bad guys on both sides as well.
It does. So when the American army started attacking the British in Philadelphia, food started to become scarce and the prices of everything increased. And Elizabeth wrote, "If things don't change, we shall be in poor plight. Everything scarce and dear, and nothing suffered to be brought into us." So things started to get really bad and ugly. And this is the crazy part. All of these people are suffering because they don't have enough food. And this is when the British officers decided to have a huge party. They threw an enormous farewell party for themselves. It was a medieval style tournament with costume knights, the whole get up, lots of eating and fireworks. In Elizabeth's diary, she wrote of how insensible these people seemed, why the land was laid desolate. With death and destruction hanging over so many, she was looking at all of these cosplaying British officers walking around as knights.
Well, pirates, they actually love to party. So they probably would have done the same.
Probably. So after the war, the Americans didn't trust the Quakers. And the Americans, when they got into Philadelphia, they searched their home for British goods and anything that they might be hiding because they were spies. And they took more blankets and horses and furniture as fines. And so she got it from both directions when the Americans came in. Now, this is the part I think is crazy, is that even loyalists, so people that were loyal to the British crown, they were also afraid when the British took over their territory. James Allen, he was suspected to be a spy for the British. To this day, Americans think that this guy was a spy for Britain. And this is what he wrote. "My situation continues as before, living in perpetual fear of being robbed, plundered, and insulted. I sincerely wish myself out of the country till this convulsion is over." And that wasn't from the Americans. That was from the British soldiers that were roaming around. The thing that the British were doing that made things so miserable is, in order to even move around the city, people needed permission from British authorities. So it cut people off from their family, from trades, from their jobs, their income. And so it made it impossible to get around the city. And again, soldiers could move into your home anytime and take whatever they wanted. One thing I forgot to mention is sometimes the British would move into the house and then they would nail a door shut or something so you couldn't even get into the other side of your house. They would just take over that whole one side. Also, any letters leaving the city passed through British censors. They read all of your mail. So if a loyalist feels this way, can you imagine how the patriots felt? Because they were targeted and they got it, I'm sure, twice as bad. Now, one more. James Lovell, he was in Boston. He was a school teacher and he was very outspoken. He had a big mouth. He started talking after the Boston Massacre and he did not stop. So after Bunker Hill, he was arrested and accused of passing information to the American army. He was put in a Boston jail for about a year in terrible conditions. And when the British were forced to move out of Boston, they took James Lovell with them, and they sent him to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and this is how he described it. He said, "The treatment of prisoners here is not only scandalous by neglecting all distinction of rank, but is also murderous by joining the nuisances and infection of a hospital to the confinement and common miseries of a jail." And he was there for 9 months. And finally, he was released as part of a prisoner exchange. And Boston was so happy that he made it back to Boston that they elected him to the Continental Congress, even though he was malnourished and super sick. He went and he did it anyway because his community wanted and needed him to do this. So the question for me is this: why on earth did they do this? Many of the loyalists were rich enough that they could buy their way into the British crowd, or they moved to Canada or Europe. But the poor and the patriots, they stayed. And why did the colonists stand up to the most powerful empire in the entire world? It's because they believed in the words of the Declaration of Independence. They truly believed that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator, that God gave each of us, His children. He gives us our lives, our liberty, and He allows us to choose our happiness, which our founders taught us. True happiness comes by having self-control and choosing to be virtuous. Our founders spoke so often how tyranny did not follow God's plan, and that we should choose to follow God. Washington wrote that the hand of providence had been so evident throughout the war that only an infidel could fail to see it. And our Declaration of Independence ends with this statement: "But with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence." The men and women that fought for our freedom, they trusted and they believed in God. James Lovell, remember him, the school teacher that was thrown into a prison, he wrote to Abigail Adams when he was released from prison, but the war was not over yet. And he said this: "We shall owe our prosperity to the unmerited favor of providence." Prison didn't change his mind about where his strength came from or what this war was all about. As I was reading all of these stories, Cydni, it reminded me of one of my very favorite scriptures. In Romans, it says, "For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord." The trick is here, though, is that we need to obey Him and invite Him in. He's given us liberty and agency, and then it's up to us to decide to let Him in or not, which is so powerful, and it's a beautiful gift. And this is the beautiful part here, is our founders chose to let Him in. And because of that, they were witnesses to miracles. They were worthy to see and to have those miracles in their lives. And providence did set them free.
Reading the firsthand accounts of people who were on the ship or helped the people on the ship has been pretty perspective changing for me for what a lot of these people went through. And it reminded me that Blackbeard was a real pirate, as you've been studying about the prison ships. And I was like, when I was reading about the pirate ships, that Blackbeard, he braided his black beard into pigtails and he tied them up with ribbons, and he would light hemp under his hat and he would look demonic, and terrified crews, they would surrender and not even fight. They were so scared.
Cydni, I thought for one brief moment that you brought something to the table that was on topic, and I was wrong. I thought you were going to bring it home, and instead I get this from you.
You do not appreciate what the pirates have done.
You know what? In fact, I got the opposite. I'm talking about God and you bring in the devil. So thanks, Cydni.
If there is not balance, what is there?
I don't know, Cydni.
I did actually read firsthand accounts, and it's very simple to actually find, because there are so many memoirs written by these people. I read several excerpts of the pirate life and also the prison ship. And I do think it's worth asking why, as you've said, why did they do this? And when I was a little distracted reading about pirates and also prison ships, I also, in a positive way, got distracted with ordinary soldiers' letters. They're heart-wrenching. You will get to see that these young men, or just like the ones in our neighborhoods, and they were out doing this, and it is heart-wrenching. James Davenport, he said that the reason they do this is because they believe in liberty, peace, and independence forever. There's another letter written by a father, and he says, God be praised, our company is hardy. The dangers we are in to encounter I know not, but it shall never be said to my children, your father was a coward.
That is so good. I think the thing that is so amazing is that obviously we've had the internet and you could find letters, but it is amazing with AI how quickly you can just get all of these. And, you know, say what you want about AI, it'll probably end up controlling us. But right now, it is so awesome to be able to pull up all of these stories and to read them for myself, or at least it points me in the right direction of what to listen to even. It's incredible. I've always tried to find stories for my students to kind of reel them in, but it is so easy to do now and unbelievable how it will get you just to the right spot at the Smithsonian or the National Archives. It's incredible.
I can't agree with you more. And that will be the challenge for this week. So everyone prepare for that, because it is the challenge. Because when I went through and read these letters, and a lot of them will say the age or where they're from, who they're writing to, they are written in such poor grammar. Some of them have not one word correctly spelled. And for me, that was actually part of what was so heart-wrenching, is that these were just young teens. They were uneducated farmers. Just like James Davenport said, they believed in liberty, peace, and independence forever. But Michael Knowles also says this: if the soldiers had one fear, it was the indifference of their countrymen, that the sacrifices would be in vain and their cause soon forgotten. Then he reads an entry from another soldier's letter. He says, there comes a soldier. He comes and cries, I fell fast. I shall soon be no more. And all the reward I shall get will be, poor Will is dead. So a lot of these young men and these young fathers, and they really did not know if their sacrifice would be in vain or not, but they had hope. And they believed that it would create America the way that they would want it to be. And I loved what you taught me with this one, Sher, that we don't really consider all of the in-between. And I also thought we probably don't really consider the after, the rebuilding as well, because financially people were in horrific situations. There wasn't much organization. People were not getting what they were told they would get. And a lot of people who started with nothing ended with even less. There was debt and people had nothing. I feel like that needs to be considered, that everything they did was purely on faith and hope. There were no promises and it was mostly a disaster. But for what? It was the hope for liberty and independence forever.
I just want to add to that. The war ended in 1781, but our Constitution was not signed until 1787. So that time period in between that, we had a loose government, I guess you could say. It was loosely put together, but there wasn't anything solid or really organized. And for some reason, we were able to keep the lid and the control on a brand new country, to keep it together for that many years, for over 6 years until the Constitution was signed. That alone to me is a miracle. These people had such self-control and truly believed in being virtuous that they were able to run their colony, now new state. They were able to keep everything together until the Constitution was finally signed. That is a miracle.
Calling it a miracle is perfect. And this leads us to our challenge. Truly spend some time online and find a personal letter from the Revolutionary War and read it. Take note of the poor grammar and how many times someone will say that they just wish that they would be home, that they thought they would be home already, and how much they're missing their family. Your perspective, your heart, it will all change. Also, make sure you figure out your pirate name. Find out what your pirate name is. Sher's is American Booty.
You were doing so good for just such a short amount of time there, and then you just had to throw that in.
I have too many personalities. They all come out real fast.
All right. Well, this brings us to our final thoughts. The thread that connects the Patriots' stories is that none of them endured because they knew how the war would end. They endured because they trusted and believed in God's words and promises. They believed that through obedience, neither death nor life, nor any power, nor anything in all creation can separate us from the love of God. They believe that, and it carried them through this war. So now it's our turn to hold on to that same trust and do our part to keep this freedom and this country alive. This is our prayer.
From Cydni and Sher. Arr.
I'm forging my way through the tip, tip, top. I'm living my life through the drip, drip, drop. When eternity's plan, I just can't stop. I'm making my way through the drip, drip, drop.
Was that good? That was a pirate noise.
That's beautiful. Thank you for not talking about pirates for a hot second.
Aye, aye, sure. American booty.
Whoops.
This is for the men, the pioneers, pioneers, pirates, whatever. How dare they? It's this pirates calling. And he tied them up with paste. It's so absurd.
I would like duct tape right now. The thread that connects the pirate story, the pirate.
I win. I win.
Okay.
I win. I win. I win. I think that was an example of brainwashing. I have been working a lot on the spy information. Actually, I've been learning how to do it, and it works apparently.
I did. You
I
got
win.
it. You
I
won.
win. I'm going to go get a burrito.
I'm so sad. Thanks for joining us.
We're so glad you're here.